Obviously, much of the broadcast this morning is going to be spent on the president's economic speech, either hearing parts of it or hearing the reaction to it. Some reaction now from ABC News correspondents who have been covering the president and covering politics. ABC News political director Hal Bruno is with us from Washington, as is Cokie Roberts in the Congress, and Brit Hume at the White House. Good morning to all of you. Brit, why don't we start with you and just give me, all three of you, a quick reaction to the speech.
From my perspective, it seemed a very commanding performance. Long as it was, the president seemed quite comfortable. His grasp of the material was evident. Looking at a text as he went along, you could see that he was ad-libbing at some length and without any trouble at all on a number of subjects, and he spoke with some real passion in several areas, particularly about health care, which I'll explain more about it later, is critically important to his whole program. So it was a speech that really got him off the defensive, which unintentionally his Monday speech had gotten him on.
Cokie?
That's exactly right. And interestingly enough, the people with whom the Monday speech most put him on the defensive were Democrats. They came in on Tuesday. They started hearing from home from people saying, what's all this tax stuff? We were electing a guy who said he was going to cut taxes for the middle class. So this speech got his Democrats back. I think the first thing that happened was that they walked into the chamber. They were so used, most of them have never been there with a Democratic president. They were so surprised to see an actual Democrat move up to the dais that they suddenly got excited about it. And several of them talked about that later, that they didn't really know how to behave. It's been forever since they've seen a Democratic president. So they got enthusiastic. And then the message that he gave was a much more moderate message than the little précis of Monday night.
Hal, was it a more moderate message, or was it just phrased more elegantly?
Well, I think it was rephrased to be reassuring, especially to the business community. He doesn't want to have another stock market drop on him. It was a well-delivered speech, almost a lecture, very much aimed at the American people and kind of using Congress as the stage. Because in the end, he's got to depend upon public support for this thing. And it's the public that's got to get the word back to Congress that they're willing to go along with it.
I want to move along, but let me go back to something Brit said. Brit, you said you wanted to talk some about the president's passion on health care and the importance of putting that package together as part of this.
Today we were briefed here at the White House complex by numerous officials about the overall program, and they showed us their estimates of the effects of the package that he unveiled today on the economy, on the deficit, and so forth. And they project, as the president promised, that during his term in office, what he hopes will only be his first term, that the deficit will decline to something on the order of half, depending on how you look at it, of what it is now. But the important thing that even on their charts, what happens to the deficit as a result of this program announced tonight, is that it goes down for several years, and then it starts going up again. Only if a health care reform program is passed is this president able to get the deficit on a continuing declining path. So you can see how important that is. After all, he doesn't want to have a program, the slogan of which is vote for the Clinton plan, get the deficit down for a while.
Cokie, I wonder if there's a problem here in that he's really trying to do lots of things at one time, and one of the Reagan lessons, it always seemed to me, was go in there and try and do one thing and try and do it really well.
No, I think he took a very serious lesson from Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan did a lot of things in one package. And that's exactly what Bill Clinton is trying to do here. He's trying to put together a package and say, are you for change or against change? Are you for me or against me? Instead of, are you for an energy tax, or are you for a tax on Social Security benefits? That is the only way, as he knows and as anybody in Congress knows, you can hold it together. But that question of health care is going to be the toughest nut of all. And there are a lot of Democrats up here tonight who are saying we might be able to do even a tax and spend package or a tax and cut package, but health care is going to be very, very, very hard.
Aaron, there's another point about that I think goes to what you said. The president said more than once over the course of these early weeks of his administration that he's trying to do something that's never been done before. That is, he's trying, at the same time that he's trying to make a major reduction in the federal deficit, he's trying to make major increases in what he likes to call investment. Now, those two things may not be utterly contradictory, but they are certainly not easily compatible, and that is part of what makes this so difficult.
Cokie, quickly something, I want to go to Hal on something else. Is the problem on health care, or part of the problem on health care, is that there just simply is no consensus yet on the Hill as to what to do?
Well, there's no consensus in the country, and there's been a tremendous failure of leadership in trying to tell people exactly what's going to happen. People think they're going to get better health care for less money, and just the opposite's going to be the case for many Americans. There's going to be, if all Americans have access to health care, it's going to cost more.
Hal, if for people who like their politics low risk, it seems to me this is the wrong time to be in the game. It's very high risk for Democrats, but it also seems to me it is very high risk for Republicans. And everything I heard out of the Republicans after the speech was fairly predictable fare.
Yeah, it was the old, it's Democratic tax and spend. You know, it really depends, Aaron, on the public reaction. The most important thing now is how well the president and just about everybody in his administration who's being sent out into the country to sell this thing, it really depends upon how well they do now. The initial public response following Monday night was very negative. And what they got to do is get a positive response going. And the feedback to Congress is really going to determine how much of this flies and how much of it goes down in defeat. It's a high risk for Congress, too. And you're right, for the Democrats in Congress. You've got a Congress that was elected on the promise to bring change in Washington. And one of the things they were not talking about, and the voters were not planning on, was an increase in taxes, which is what they're selling.
Also, Aaron, I think the Republicans are not terribly relevant to this. What they are saying is, look, we are the minority. There's no reason for us to do anything but sit back and let the Democrats fight this out. If we cooperate with the president and it fails, he'll blame us. If he succeeds, we'll get none of the credit. The smartest thing for us to do is sit back, smile, and watch the Democrats fight.
Yeah, you're right. You know, Aaron, he's not going to get very many Republicans, if any, coming over to his side. Yeah. What he's got to do is make sure that he holds all of those Democrats, or certainly the great majority of them.
And is that more problematic than it might seem? I mean, he's got healthy majorities. Healthy majorities are sometimes more difficult in politics to deal with than very narrow majorities are.
Well, Cokie knows it better than I up there on the Hill, but he's got a lot of Democrats who were elected by the skin of their teeth, in some from what are basically Republican districts, where raising taxes is not a popular thing.
Also, keep in mind that the whole Congress, the whole House, is up for re-election next year.
That's right.
They can't wait for a long-term benefit. They need it to happen fast.
Aaron, it's worth noting, too, that the president has this stimulus package, and there's been a lot of questions raised about why, with the economic recovery seeming now to take hold in the real sense, anything like this is needed. I think it's, in political terms, it's a bit easier to understand. If after all, you can go out and spend $16 billion on various projects out in your states and districts, and if there is some increase in economic activity around the nation as a result of that, at least those members of Congress who are asked to vote for these other measures are going home in what they hope will be an economy that is continued to grow, at least, and maybe even growing faster than it is now, which is, when it comes to re-election, there's nothing more important than that.
And nothing better. Britt, the president is about to go out and do what he, I think, does better than almost anyone on the stage these days, and that's sell this thing. He's going to go out and campaign for this, and he leaves later today, right?
He leaves later today for Missouri, and then he goes on to Ohio and to New York State, where he'll go to Hyde Park. I wonder why. And this will be Clinton on the stump in the milieu that so many people feel is where he's at his best. I must tell you, Aaron, that the president's salesmanship on this is very important. It's critical to getting the program passed. The one question that really hasn't been addressed by all of this, and I must tell you isn't addressed very effectively by some of the president's spokespeople here, is the question about the efficacy of the plan. How much risk do you run if you hit the economy with what even the Clinton people acknowledge is the second biggest tax increase in the nation's history? How big a risk do you run that the economic recovery simply stalls out because of the consequences of the tax increase? They like to estimate the amount of jobs created by the stimulus package, so-called, at 500,000. When you ask them whether that is a figure that takes into account any jobs that may be lost, and some will inevitably be lost, at least in some sectors of the economy because of the tax increases, you get kind of a stony glance, and they say, well, no, they haven't figured that out yet. Well, those are questions that the public is going to be asking, and then, of course, if the program takes effect, we'll see.
And Wall Street, for what it was worth, reacted to that on Tuesday. Hal and Cokie and Brit, thanks a lot for joining us this morning to kick around the president's speech. It's good to talk to all of you on World News Now. Check morning papers from around the country, lots of them to do. Everybody led with the president's speech. But there were 3, maybe even 4 distinct ways to headline the speech. You can do the pull the quote from the speech lead. The Asbury Park Press of Asbury Park, New Jersey. We must do this together is their lead. Can you see that? Get a little closer to the TV, I think, be able to see it. Okay, that's one way to lead it. The Post-Tribune of Porter County, Indiana. This is sort of emphasizing the tax portion. Tax man. Okay. Or you can kind of lump all this stuff together. Clinton calls for higher taxes on energy, earnings, and benefits. Wealthiest would be hit hardest. The San Francisco Chronicle. The Atlanta Constitution, a very neutral headline. Clinton's new direction. He vows to be deficit with tax-driven plan is the sub-headline there. The Los Angeles Times and the Washington Post even look alike this morning. Clinton warns of diminished future if spending cuts, taxes aren't passed. Got both the cuts and the taxes in there. The Washington Post, Clinton unveils his plan to create jobs, trim deficit, restore economic fairness. I would guess that the White House would like that headline a lot. Probably wouldn't mind this one either. The Reno Gazette-Journal, Clinton taps every American. There's a kind of a fairness thing going on there. I guarantee you, though, the White House will hate this headline. It comes from the Hartford Courant in Hartford, Connecticut. Clinton proposes massive tax hike is the way they headlined the president's speech last night. How are we doing on time? Terrific. Kansas City Star. I don't know how that works. The New Direction for the United States is their headline on the president's speech. Selling painful plan is likely to be tough is their second story. And, oh, yeah, servers of beef are now saying well done, by the way. I think it's that hamburger thing. The Indianapolis Star gave a nice headline to the president's speech, I think, from the White House point of view. Clinton prescribes course of change. Tax increase will test national courage, he says. And that's also what the Indianapolis Star said. Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, I don't think is going to be a favorite at the White House today. Clinton's new direction, okay, the White House could live with that. Can Americans be taxed into prosperity is their top story, an analysis piece by the Associated Press. That's how they headline that. Quickly, the 2 tabloids in New York, the Daily News led the same way as the Post-Tribune of Porter County, Indiana. Tax man. And the New York Post, I think, has the best headline of the day. Ouch. The president's speech. That's your morning papers from around the country. Lots of them. This is World News Now from New York.